This is Mark Gunn Media.
Hit it!
Welcome to GunnShots, straight from the hip. I'm your host, Mark Gunn. The views expressed on this program are those of the host and guests and not necessarily reflective of anyone or any entity associated with this broadcast. This episode, Baraargua, The Awakening, Part 2. As I explained in the last episode, which is available wherever you get your podcasts, we're doing something a little different over the next few weeks with GunnShots Straight from the Hip. Inspired by a recent ancestry DNA test that I got, I learned that a significant portion of my ancestry comes from Africa. And because of that, I decided to dig out a short story I wrote a couple of years ago that deals directly with the Motherland. Again, if you missed part 1, it's available at markgunmedia.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Chapter 3, Isifo, the Gift. As the tragic events in America continued to unfold, attempts at gaining freedom were becoming more frequent. While they hadn't been able to assassinate anyone from the administration, lower-level cabinet members were targeted. White nationalist Steve Bannon, once the head of the Security Council, had been shown the door by his replacement, General Mattis, back in 2017. Bannon was then appointed as the National Media Czar. With the Federal Communications Commission gone, all radio and TV stations fell under his control. The last few newspapers were shut down because Trump didn't like to read, and internet use was eliminated. The dissemination of ideas not approved by the administration became a capital offense. Television news as we knew it was destroyed. News personalities that Trump didn't like were either exiled or killed. Liberal voices Anderson Cooper, Joe Scarborough, Chris Cuomo, and Rachel Maddow, all gone. Even conservatives like Bill Kristol and one-time Fox News anchor Shepard Smith, who had since gone to CNBC, were shown the door. Speaking of Fox, the only ones left were the members of their laughable excuse of a morning show, Fox and Friends, and Sean Hannity, who was made head of the network by presidential appointment. There was no such thing as a free and independent press anymore. Bannon's job was to continue to spoon-feed the citizens the all is well, nothing to see here message. What he'd been able to do was incorporate a practice that was outlawed back in the 1970s. He brought back subliminal messaging designed to keep whites thinking that they were superior and that the treatment of blacks and other people of color was perfectly justified. The high-tech version of Richard Nixon's Southern strategy. Bannon was a creature of habit. He would go to the old offices of Breitbart News every day at 2 p.m. For some reason, only known to himself, no one else would be in the building at that time. Maybe it was his attempt at being seen as a good boss by letting the staff knock off that early. Ironically, the Breitbart building exploded on March 1st, 2021, 9 years to the day that Andrew Breitbart, the original founder, died. Bannon happened to be in the building at that time. Sessions investigated, but the culprit was never found. Here at home, my team and I developed the means of black liberation. It was another gift of sorts from our dear mother Nubia, Ukafila. While researching my family tree, I learned several crucial things about black DNA. Thanks to the remains of our dear Ukafila, we discovered that the original man was genetically superior to those that came after him. I had a team of linguists translate some of Mother Nubia's writings, and she spoke of her children having the strength of 20 men and boundless intelligence. There was an old TV sportscaster named Jimmy the Greek Snyder who was fired from CBS for saying that blacks were basically bred to be physically superior. You couldn't say things like that back on television back then because it was seen as racist. Who knew? There were ancient mathematical equations that would lead to some of our most important breakthroughs. Another aspect of our mission became to finally expose, in no uncertain terms, the lies told by the European world. Questions about our morality and intelligence would be put to rest once and for all. Our history would be made complete and 100% accurate. What would I do with this information? How can I use it to free my people? The answer would come from the mind of a child. During one of the many conferences we have with various African leaders, we check their progress on a lot of the initiatives used to improve life overall. We often exchange ideas, and children are encouraged to be a part of those discussions. The mindset being that these are our future warriors and leaders. Give them the building blocks of leadership early in life, and they'll transition into the leaders we need at the proper time. 12-year-old Prince Ikawe, who already had an uncanny grasp of the more complex aspects of genetics, asked about the possibility of returning our DNA to its original state, giving us the physical and mental characteristics of our ancestors needed to overcome the American oppressors. I told him of the old Marvel comic book character Captain America and the whole origin story of how he was injected with a super soldier serum that altered his physique and gave him heightened abilities. His Highness, with a light of maturity far beyond his years, told me how silly it was and left his father and I a little dumbfounded. Hey, we were comic book fans growing up. Sue me. Kids, they don't make them like they used to. He was right about one thing, though. We need to go back in order to move forward. We spent the next few months developing and testing the formula that would end up being our ultimate weapon. We gave it the code name Mfuko. Meanwhile, there were reports of chinks in the administration's armor. Several months after the Bannon assassination, tensions were beginning to mount between America and the Russians. It seemed that Putin wanted more control than he had, and in light of his influence on the 2016 election, he was owed that much. The point of contention, once again, was Syria. President Assad had outlived his usefulness after gassing his own citizens a few years back. This was a severe miscalculation on his part because several assets were destroyed as well. A growing resistance was taking shape, and that couldn't be tolerated. Putin had Assad killed. However, the administration replaced him with his daughter, who was just as sick and twisted as he was. She also had designs on the Kremlin. Needless to say, this didn't set well with Vladimir. This was a fight that lasted the better part of the decade. Mysterious deaths by poison, Russian and Syrian officials vanishing without a trace. What do you know? The makings of another Cold War. We were making progress, and the tests for Mfuko were successful. What we needed to do was to bind our formula to a very specific set of genetic markers, those belonging to Mother Nubia. The end result of what would be called Operation Kabusha would be a natural immunity to all disease, an increase in height, muscle mass, strength, and an unlocking of all the brain's quadrants, making the cerebral cortex fire on all cylinders. There would be one more gift that wouldn't be revealed until it was time. While preparations were being made, there was another aspect of the battle that was beginning to bear fruit. One of the things long hidden from American history until the late 21st century was the list of companies that directly profited from slavery. Companies that have existed for hundreds of years and thought themselves absolved of any culpability. There were quite a few. Financial giant Lehman Brothers, who admitted their role in the slave trade. America's largest health insurer at that time, Aetna, who reimbursed slave owners for their losses after slavery was abolished. J.P. Morgan Chase, who talked about two of their predecessors accepting some 13,000 slaves as loan collateral, and menswear giant Brooks Brothers got its start by selling slave clothing to owners. These were but a few businesses that profited from bondage, but the ones we were specifically looking at were the linchpins to the American economy. The administration made financial institutions too big to fail, and boy, were they in for a very rude awakening. Chapter 4. Safarka, the Journey. In the year and a half that passed since Operation Kabusha was finalized, the administration began to notice some anomalies in their revenue streams. You see, having learned the lessons of hundreds of years of fiscal recklessness, the administration and its financial network tracked every dollar down to the penny. The crash of 2007 was forever etched in their minds. In the rare event that revenues were off, forensic accountants would find the discrepancy and reconcile it. The penalty for the person that missed it in the first place was often being beaten and then put on a work detail for 6 months. Since the only ones dealing with money were white, death was rarely an option. The oddities were so minute, it would usually take months to find them. Move a fraction of a cent here, take a fraction of a cent from over there, very hard to trace. These monetary missteps were, of course, being caused by the Baraargua and served as a distraction for the next phase of our plan. The next step was to actually launch Operation Kabusha by getting the formula to America. Thanks to the writings of Grand Nubia, we were able to develop technology far advanced than anything seen on the planet. The irony of it is that it's thousands of years old. Planning the route and delivery was fairly easy. We brought in a group of 8-year-old engineering students from Nairobi to plot the course and come up with the delivery system. These kids came up with a two-pronged approach based on old-school nanotech and fiber optics. The difference was that while it had physical substance, it couldn't be seen or felt. They called it Okunga Banakali, the unseen. The formula would be transmitted through the air and water, launched in its most concentrated form, and slowly dispersed once it reached America. You know, there's something awe-inspiring about seeing children working together. In a more innocent time, they'd be working on an erupting volcano for a science fair project. These young warriors were working on something much, much bigger. One of the students, a Somali girl named Diirada, suggested sending it along the transatlantic slave route. While the irony of her suggestion wasn't lost on anyone, the route itself had to be slightly altered because there were so many different destinations during the original 5,000-mile journey. We focused on the original ports of entry: New Orleans, Louisiana, Charleston, South Carolina, and Richmond, Virginia. We then diverted the routes that went to Central and South America and Europe to the West Coast, with various entry points throughout California and Washington State. With the advent of our technology, it would reach America in nanoseconds. The way that led to our 400 years of bondage would now be the way to our salvation. Chapter 5. Imatolewa, released. April 4th, 2038. The date very deliberately chosen. Those of you that study history will see its significance. It was exactly 1 second after midnight that Operation Kubasha was launched. Less than 1 second later, the Mfuko formula given to us by our mother, Grand Nubia, transported by what could be best described as a virtual nuclear warhead, reached its destination, the United States of America. 2 seconds later, it began its mission of seeking out members of the original family through a very special genetic code. We were able to calculate the number to 13,572,402 brothers and sisters. Those would be the soldiers on the front line in the battle for liberation. The process would be subtle and take a few weeks. The Koiska, as they would come to be called, would slowly see and feel the changes within themselves. Their heightened intellect would let them know exactly what was happening. One of the gifts included within the formula was a subliminal set of instructions. Each member of the Koiska had specific tasks, and they would follow them to the letter in preparation for the next phase of our attack. I was able to follow the progress of my brothers and sisters as they prepared to reach the peak of physical and mental perfection. At the end of the process, men and women would become the kings and queens they were always meant to be. June 19th, 2038. Another date deliberately chosen. Those members of the Koiska that were held as slaves began the process of grooming other blacks for battle through the teachings of ancient African fighting techniques. These came before any other martial arts and were subsequently banned by the Western world because of their brutal efficiency. They were taught how to still the mind and focus on their inner spirit. They were given something that in over 400 years America had never given them: a spiritual link to the Motherland. It was through that link that even in what was temporary bondage, they found peace. My other brothers and sisters executed their part of the plan by working their way through America's infrastructure. No institution would be safe. Media, financial, and medical, all targets for what was to come. Meanwhile, here at home, the cyber attacks on the administration were increased. Only this time, vast sums of money were disappearing without a trace. Forensic scientists couldn't make heads or tails of what was happening. A lot more people got hurt as a result, some even killed. How do you think Steve and Jeff and Ivanka would react if they found out that they were being punked by some of the sharpest financial minds on the planet? A bunch of 7-year-olds. Man, I love kids. President Trump? From what I hear throughout our intelligence, he only makes an appearance once a year now. Seems Big Pharma cut off his meds when a deal fell through that cost them several billions. Trump just wanders around Mar-a-Lago with a golf club in his hand, drooling and looking for the putting green. Since the administration abolished the internet, no one has had to put up with his incessant tweets. I guess some good did come out of all of that. One of the things I learned from my parents is that sometimes you have to give people a false sense of security. It makes them sloppy and careless, and so the cyber attacks ceased for a while, and the other work continued. More of our story right after this. If you're an advertiser, one of the most important things about getting your message out is actually standing out from the rest of the crowd. If you're listening to this program right now, this is where you'd hear your commercial. As an exclusive sponsor of GunnShots Straight from the Hip, your commercial is professionally produced and gets a longer shelf life based on your needs. GunnShots Straight from the Hip is a unique and compelling program unlike anything else in the marketplace. Episodes are available for download on iTunes, TuneIn, and MarkGunnMedia.com. And depending on how you tailor your message, the potential for new and repeat customers is that much greater. Best of all, it's extremely cost-effective. If you'd like more information on how you can be a sponsor of this broadcast, call Mark Gunn Media, Inc. at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Or log on to markgunnmedia.com. For downloads of this and past episodes and information about all the multimedia services we offer, log on to our website at www.markgunnmedia.com. That's markgunnmedia.com. Welcome back to Gunshot Straight from the Hip. I'm Mark Gunn. We're in the middle of part 2 of the Baraargua, The Awakening, an Afro-futuristic sci-fi story that I've written as a celebration of the ancestral DNA results I received recently, giving me a rather significant link to Africa. Chapter 6, Impe, the Battle. It's been several months since Operation Kabusha began, and the results have been very promising. The administration continues to take financial losses it can't explain. Not sitting too well with their allies either. The Koiska has been successful in worming their way into the infrastructure, causing several mysterious events. The rolling blackouts in New York and Los Angeles last month were epic, especially since they happened right in the middle of the annual Trump military parade extravaganza. Every year, the slaves were rounded up and forced to watch the Trumpian ego run amok. And to think, this whole thing started when back in 2017, he whined about wanting a military parade after seeing another country, I forget which one, showing off their military might. As time went on, strange reports from all over the country began coming from Jeff Sessions' forces. Scores of black men laughing in the faces of police officers while being beaten. 12 officers in Baltimore had their necks snapped. Another 20 were hung in Oakland. The state-run media is fighting a losing battle when it comes to keeping this information from the general populace. My sisters, tasked with shutting down the media, report that they're making progress. Tapping into the global network's old internet-based wireless system and routing all transmissions to a separate global BitTorrent network was inspired. Back in the mid-2000s, hackers used to distribute pirated movies in small pieces or bits from several different servers at the same time. Those pieces would then come together to give the viewer a full movie. Thanks to an incredibly bright 10-year-old named Akun, we were able to update this methodology for our purposes. History can be a wonderful thing. As we've seen over several months, more whites are starting to shake off the effects of the subliminal brainwashing they've been subjected to for hundreds of years. They look around and are confused. The white supremacy they were taught to believe in is crumbling all around them. Quite a few of them are innocent victims of a system that was designed for their benefit. They simply lived their lives within a bubble of whiteness that was supposed to protect them, even if they never realized it. We have a directive that no harm shall come to any of them. They will be re-educated in order to become productive members of the society that's rising before their eyes. Those that knowingly participated in our degradation, well, their fate has already been decided. One by one, the institutions that propped up America's racism are beginning to crack. Banks, manufacturers, colleges, and universities. Now is the perfect time to strike. Chapter 6, VUCA, Rise. Over the last few weeks, events in the United States have left their allies concerned. The administration is losing control of its people. Incidents of open rebellion and continued infighting between Miller, Sessions, and Trump. The last thing Putin needs is for this virus to spread and infect his people. He's still looking over his shoulder for the daughter of Assad, the Syrian president he murdered years ago. She's been consolidating power and has managed to bump off Putin's second in command. How can he deal with that and the problems in America? He won't have to for much longer. The Baraargua has been successful in creating chaos in a once orderly world. Years of hard work and planning have come to this. Time for the rise of the original man once again. Our dear mother, Grand Nubia, the original giver of life, has provided everything we need to thrive once again as a civilization. Through her, Africa has been unified for decades, and we are the most technologically advanced nation on the earth. Through her, we've been able to get back to what we once were, the peak of human perfection. We've eliminated sickness, slowed down death, and unleashed the full potential of our minds. Now, after many years of watching my brothers and sisters in America suffer under the most vile and brutal regime in history, we bring it all to an end. In the Mfuko formula we developed to restore our people to their true selves, there were several subliminal commands designed to trigger them into performing the tasks that they were picked for. There was only one command left, the one word that set into motion a global chain of events that would change everything forever. That word, that one command, was to be given by the youngest of us. I said before that in this society, children were strongly encouraged to be a part of shaping its future because it is indeed their future. Nkosazana is a 4-year-old warrior princess from the Zulu nation. Her family is a story in contradictions. The Zulus are among the deadliest fighters in the world, bar none. However, she has been one of the most effective symbols of peace in all of Africa. It was decided among the elders of other nations that she would be the one to usher in this new era of profound change. She dons the headset, positions a small microphone to her mouth, and gives me a knowing look. It is the look of an old soul, one who has seen it all before. At only 4 years of age, she has a keen understanding of what she is about to do. The organized chaos comes to a halt. Warriors already in place stand in silence, ready. A hush falls over the command center as she gives me one more look. She stares intently at the bank of monitors in front of her as if surveying what will one day be her kingdom. It will. She speaks. Bavuke! Rise. With that one word, an incredible sight unfolds. All over America, the over 13 million members of the Khoiska transform. They grow to stand at 7 feet 2 inches tall with an average weight of 300 pounds of solid muscle. Their frames are suddenly clad in black uniforms of a unibody design, form-fitting from head to toe and designed for maximum flexibility. Their faces completely covered in a black mask. It has a design of a clenched fist bearing the colors of the African nation, red, black, and green. The color scheme continues seamlessly down the sides of the uniform. This scene is repeated all over the country at the same time. Sessions' white supremacy forces converge on each location, and as they stand ready to confront this new and unknown threat, the Khoiska vanish, leaving the police staring into the angry eyes of those they've beaten and abused for years. This is when the training kicks in. The hunted have become the hunters, and they've learned their lessons well, as over 400 years of hostility and pain is taken out on their one-time tormentors. Very few of Sessions' forces escape with their lives. Other members of the Khoiska have been dispatched to various white supremacist strongholds across the country. Thanks to the rather extensive database of hate groups thought long to be destroyed when the employees of the Southern Poverty Law Center were murdered in another government-sanctioned assassination, we were able to track the locations of every hate group in the country. When all was said and done, some 88,000 members were killed in a matter of minutes. They never knew what hit them. Thanks to the efforts of my sisters in sabotaging the media, scenes like this were broadcast all over the globe. Word of this reached the administration, and the panic set in. Ivanka tries to gain access to her funds. They're no longer there. The same goes for Miller and Sessions. They'll soon learn the fate of the money and a few other things as well. 5 minutes after the Khoiska vanished, several teams were transported to the various seats of the administration's power. At the exact same instant, Miller, Sessions, Trump, and Putin were surrounded by the massive black figures that appeared out of nowhere. They found the president drooling, swinging a golf club and yelling at a stuffed bobcat in the lobby. Calls to the military went unanswered. A series of EMPs, Electromagnetic pulses rendered their equipment useless. Military leadership was rounded up and held at the Pentagon. Politicians who had been deemed useless years ago when Trump was elected were also held. They had a chance to do something about the president back in 2018 when he should have been driven from office. They didn't. They decided that lining their pockets was more important than protecting the American people. Any opposition to the Koiska was rendered useless. Ordinary Americans, still coming out of their brainwashed racist stupor, were confused and disoriented. They were advised to stay in their homes. Measures were put into place to make sure that they did. The time for explanations was now, and I had one more trick up my sleeve. I consulted with a team of 16-year-old graphic designers who were doing some really incredible things with holograms. They were able to develop an algorithm that gave the images more density, just shy of being able to touch them. I wanted something very specific, something that would be an homage to my namesakes, Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey, with some bits and pieces of Martin Luther King Jr. thrown in. Malcolm and Marcus because throughout history, Americans were taught that they were to be feared, so I thought I'd indulge them. And Martin as an act of vengeance for his family and for the way America tried to pervert his message to justify its own racist behavior. The teens developed a holographic image that, through the use of high-frequency video swapping, would create rapidly alternating images of Malcolm, Marcus, and Martin. Think of how the old internet Wi-Fi worked back in the day. The router would constantly change channels, attempting to lock onto the strongest bandwidth possible at any given time. The rate of video swapping is such that each face is recognizable for fractions of a second. The voice was a synthesis of the speech patterns of all three men as well. The students had a theory about the frequency of their speaking voices, baritone in nature, being one of the reasons why they were able to hold the attention of so many people during their lifetimes. In the midst of an eerie quiet, a silence so loud it was heard around the world, my hologram appeared. I began. We are the Baraargua. We are the original man. The black-clad men and women among you are my family. We are who we are always meant to be, the true rulers of this world. I continued. Here in America, you have continued a legacy of pure evil for well over 400 years. That ends today. Your sanctioning of the barbarism committed against people of color will be dealt with here and now. And that brings us to the end of part 2 of Baraargua, The Awakening, an Afro-futuristic sci-fi tale written by yours truly. Remember, you can catch part 1 and any other episodes of the podcast simply by going to my website at markgunmedia.com/gunshots or anywhere you get your podcasts. We will have the conclusion of this story next week. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. The views expressed are those of the host and guests and not reflective of any business entity or anyone associated with this broadcast. If you have any comments or want more information on how to be a sponsor, log on to our website at markgunmedia.com or call us at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Thank you for listening.
Mark Gun Media. No hype, no hoopla, just damn good work.